Swing on NFL Live. What is Matthew Stafford's future with the Rams? Adam Schefter with the latest on the Super Bowl winning quarterback and who might replace him should he leave. Plus, there's a new defensive coordinator in the Big D. Hear what Matt Eberflus's plan is to turn that Cowboys defense around in 2025. And deja vu all over again for the Ravens. Is it a missing piece or lack of execution that keeps the Ravens from the Super Bowl picture? We will dive into all of that coming up. It is great to have you with us on NFL Live. I'm Hannah Storm, along with Louis Redick and Ryan Clark, and Booger McFarland is going to be joining us in just a bit. Meanwhile, stories making headlines around the NFL. The Eagles have their replacement for Kellen Moore, naming passing game coordinator Kevin Patullo the new offensive coordinator. He's been with the team since 2021. He was named the associate head coach in 2023. Should definitely help provide some continuity for Jalen Hurts, who will now have his, get this, sixth play caller in the NFL. And this is good news for teams per our Dan Graziano. The NFL today informing teams that the 2025 per team salary cap will fall in the range of $277.5 million to $281.5 million. That is way up from last year's $255.4 million. The cap will have increased by more than $53 million over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, as of 24 hours ago, team can franchise tag their players. Here are some potential tag candidates, starting with the Chiefs' Trey Smith, a first-time Pro Bowler this season, won 94% of his pass blocks, well above the 91% average. How about Sam Darnold, also a Pro Bowler for the first time, ranked in the top 5 in the NFL in passing yards and touchdowns in 2024. Vikings don't use that tag often, by the way, on offensive players. The last time they did was 2003. And here we are again with the Bengals and T. Higgins, career-high 10 TD catches last season. He would be the third wide receiver ever to be tagged multiple times, joining Chris Godwin and Rob Moore. Now, T. Higgins is just one question facing the Bengals as they try to build a team to get back to the Super Bowl. They got a taste of it. Looking ahead to 2025, Joe Burrow's record-breaking extension kicks in. Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson, you've heard all about it. Both salary cap hits around $20 million, both set to be unrestricted free agents at the end of next season. So I am finally done talking and setting the table. Time now for the experts. All right, Louis, put your GM hat on. Give us a game plan for these Bengals not to bungle it.
Yeah, look, Hannah, I think obviously they're going to have to prioritize this big three that they have right now that Joe Burrow and everyone else is talking about as being critical to the Cincinnati Bengals continuing their ascension, you know, in the AFC North and in the AFC overall. And by the big three, I'm talking about, look, they have to prioritize Jamar Chase. We know how important he is to Joe Burrow's success. We know what kind of record-setting season he had this year and how he hit the trifecta in terms of receiving yards, receptions, and touchdown catches. When you do that, when you're a Triple Crown winner like that, you just have to make sure you take care of that guy. But Trey Hendrickson, when we're talking about the guys who are primarily responsible for slowing down the passing attacks in the NFL, we're talking about pass rushers. And Trey Hendrickson has been one of the best signings that Cincinnati has had in their history. He's a guy who's done nothing but produce for them since he stepped onto the field there in Cincinnati. You have to get him done. You cannot just let him walk and let someone else reap the benefits of how good he is as a player. And then T. Higgins has been someone we've been talking about for years. Every team needs a number 2 or a 1A. T would be a 1 at many other places, and there are plenty of people right now who would love for him to be a number 1. If you can fit them all in the salary cap, underneath the salary cap, which is obviously going up to the point where you should be able to fit him, then it becomes a cash issue. Are you willing to spend the cash like teams like Philadelphia are willing to spend? And I'm not talking about cap dollars. I'm talking about cold, hard cash out of the owner's pocket. I think that is at the crux of the debate about Cincinnati's commitment to winning. Are they willing to spend money? Real money.
But see, Louis, I don't think that the viewers understand what you're talking about or the fans actually get it. Or to me, even Joe Burrow, who keeps pointing to the Philadelphia Eagles and what they were able to do with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts to keep that core together. The other piece that I think Joe Burrow often misses with the Cincinnati Bengals as it compares to the Eagles is the way that the Bengals have drafted defensively. They've spent a lot of those draft picks on the defensive side of the ball, and they were no good. These guys aren't showing up like we see the guys from Georgia or like we see the two young defensive backs that showed up from Toledo and Iowa and Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. And so you do want to keep Trey Hendrickson. You do want to keep Jamar Chase. You do want to do all you can to re-sign T. Higgins or at least not let him walk out of the door for nothing. And so I think there's so much that has to go on with this football team. But last year, you just weren't good enough on defense. You had a record-setting offense. Yeah. And so there's a lot of work that starts with these big three, but moves into the draft and acquiring other small pieces to make you competitive.
Exactly. If you're going to spend that kind of money on the offensive side of the ball, Lewis, you got to have young guys at the very least who are not as expensive on the defensive side of the ball getting it done. And Joe Burrow is putting on the pressure here.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that obviously it puts the onus on the scouting department and on the coaching staff once they wind up drafting these players to develop that side of the ball and make sure that side of the ball remains productive. And you have to be very selective in terms of veteran acquisitions that you bring in. They can't all be market-leading acquisitions in terms of money that you spend on them. Yeah. But I think most importantly in the end here, and I'll just tie it up by saying this, when you do have young players on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball that wind up performing the way you projected them to, you have to find a way to take care of a large majority of them, especially if they play critical positions or their locker room leaders. You can't let them just walk. They need to start doing that, starting with this group of free agents right now.
Yeah, and all these guys are expecting guaranteed money, too, so that's part of it. How about another team that's drafted really well recently, the Los Angeles Rams? Let's talk about Matthew Stafford. Still working through issues with him with his contract. Reportedly, little progress has been made. He's coming off a very strong 10-7 season, that divisional round appearance in Philly, the penultimate year of a 4-year, $160 million extension, and the money that he's due really putting the team in a financial bind. Here's Adam Schefter.
Matthew Stafford and the Rams, as we tape this Tuesday morning, February 18th, they've been trying to see if they can work out a new contract. And if they can, Matthew Stafford will remain in Los Angeles and he'll remain a Ram. But he's due $35 million this year. None of it is guaranteed. And it's up to those two sides to figure out a number that the Rams can live with, that Matthew Stafford is more comfortable with, that would enable him to continue and finish his NFL career with the Rams. That's the goal, I believe, of both sides.
So as of now, Matthew Stafford's contract will give the Rams a salary cap hit of almost $50 million next season. That's the fifth highest of any player in the NFL. It will also be the highest cap hit in Rams franchise history. He does turn 37 this month. This will be his 17th NFL season in 2025. As you know, they've already told Cooper Kupp they're going to trade him. RC, let's start with you. What is the best move for this organization as it pertains to Stafford?
I mean, the Los Angeles Rams have done the improbable. Remember, everyone said when they were acquiring all of this talent, trading away those draft picks, it was like you may win right now, but then you're going to be at salary cap hell and your team's going to suck. Well, they haven't. But a large reason that they haven't is because Les Snead has drafted well. And on the other side of that, Matthew Stafford has continued to play at a high level. And so that salary cap hit is too high. But you have to ask yourself these questions. If it's not Matthew Stafford, then who is it going to be? And if we're going to lose him, then what are we going to get in return for Matthew Stafford? You've allowed yourself to continue to be competitive, not only in the NFC West, but the entire NFC, because you've made the right decisions in free agency and in the draft. This decision with Matthew Stafford may be most important decision that he's had since being the GM, because if they want to stay competitive, they have to continue to be good at that position with all of the pieces surrounding him. Can't just walk. You have to make sure that you're who can play high level football.
All right, RC is obviously breaking up a little bit, but back to Lewis. What do you think is the best scenario for the Rams?
Yeah, look, Hannah, I think people get into trouble, teams get into trouble But I think in general, people, when they're talking about, well, we should just trade away this very valuable asset and, use all those, pieces that we get back in terms of draft picks, all that draft capital to just go ahead and build out the rest of the team, as if you could just take a guy like Matthew Stafford and replace him with any old body. I think that really is foolish logic. I think RC laid out a very good point, which is this. Yes, it puts the onus on the scouting department and the coaching staff to go ahead and develop the rest of the roster, especially when you have someone like Matthew Stafford taking up a disproportionate amount of the salary cap. But guess what? If you flip it around and you take Matthew out of there, but then you think, hey, I'm a genius, I can just get all these other pieces and build it around whoever the next quarterback is, and you think you're going to have the same kind of success, I guarantee you're not. You're not going to have the same kind of success because this guy is different. There's a reason why you pay him the way you do. There's a reason why Matthew Stafford is going to walk into the Hall of Fame. There's a reason why when we were watching him against the Philadelphia Eagles in the divisional round and you see the no-look touchdown pass right there, that this guy was two plays away from maybe upsetting Philadelphia and knocking them out of the playoffs. He's different. He's a difference maker. I think they need to find a way to make this work and get him back in the fold for at least 2 to 3 more years. Because if you don't, and you do put him on the trade market, I'm lining up. I'm lining up at the door going, I want some of that. Yeah. I want Matthew Stafford on my team.
Yeah, playing at it.
Lewis, but isn't that the question that Leslie is going to have to answer, though? He's going to have to figure out that on the other side, all of those people that are lining up to acquire Matthew Stafford, what can I get from him and for him? And also, too, how much does he have left in the tank? Do you believe that you're going to compete for a Super Bowl in the years that Matthew Stafford will be playing at a high level? And so for you, Lewis, if you're the GM, if you're Les Snead and you're the Los Angeles Rams, is there a price you would be looking for if you put Matthew Stafford on the trade market?
Yeah, the only thing I can say right now is it would be a high one. Okay, a real high one. Because I'll tell you what, do I think that they can compete for a Super Bowl title in the next 2 to 3 years? They could have competed to go to the Super Bowl this year, were it not for some critical errors made up front on the offensive line in a critical situation and turning loose one of the best players in the NFL, and Jalen Carter. I mean, they were right there. You saw how they dismantled Minnesota. Yeah. This football team can play with anybody. They can play with absolutely anybody. And they have a new draft class coming in this year. So look, I do think that Matthew is a guy who can take you to the promised land in Los Angeles, or at least compete to take you there in the next 2 to 3 years, no question.
Yeah, and they did it in the snow, by the way, playing the Super Bowl champs tougher than anybody did. I want to get back to Shefty for just a moment, because he also weighed in on who he thinks could be a potential replacement for Stafford if it comes to that.
If the Rams couldn't get a deal done with Stafford, if they decided to trade him, a lot of ifs involved, then Aaron Rodgers, in my mind, would be thrilled with the idea of going to Los Angeles. And the Rams could probably get him at a lower cost than it would be for Matthew Stafford. They get draft pick compensation back for Stafford. So you could see where the Rams would say, is that a more desired alternative?
All right, let's just go along with this possibility. Sean McVay times Aaron Rodgers collab. Lewis, do you see that working?
Mm-hmm. I talked about this earlier today on Get Up. I do suspect that would be something that could potentially work, and I'll tell you why. Look, I think at this point in Aaron Rodgers' career, you don't want to have him come into an organization, or let me put it this way. He doesn't need to go into an organization where he can call all the shots. And he can just say, I want you to bring in this receiver. I want you to bring in this OC. I want you to bring in this quarterback coach. I want you to bring in this offensive tackle. Hey, I got another buddy that plays free safety who I think would be good on this team. That's just not going to work. He's already tried that. He needs to just play quarterback, which he does as well as anybody in the history of the game has ever played it. He needs to go somewhere where people are going to tell him, hey, look, we'll handle building the team. We'll handle constructing the offense. Obviously, you're going to have an input into that, given what your status is and what you have done in your career. And then we're going to try and build this thing, and we're going to try and make it such that we accentuate, your positives, try to hide some of your negatives, try to hide some of your decline, but we still think you can take us to a high level of play and have us reach some of our goals. Yeah, I think the Rams could be that kind of team for him. I think he would respect Sean McVay. I think that's how it could go there, and that could be one of those sneaky good signings.
Yeah. No, I actually absolutely agree with this. I think you can't necessarily look at all the things that happened with the New York Jets and just believe that Aaron Rodgers can no longer throw the football. He can no longer read defenses and put the football where they should be. And we've watched Sean McVay tailor things to allow quarterbacks to do what makes them best, to play to the highest of their potential. And Aaron Rodgers has had an opportunity to find the humility and know that I don't have all the answers. I can't move all of the chess pieces. And with Sean McVay, he's also someone that has earned the respect and has the cachet where he can go to Aaron Rodgers and say, this is how the offense should look. You can't tailor everything around him. And so if they can have that sort of relationship, those sorts of conversations, but more importantly, that level of compromise, I believe Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback that could succeed in LA and allow LA to succeed around him.
Yeah, and he was very good over those last 10 games as he was working his way back from the Achilles, and he does seem to be a guy who's very into self-reflection. So as you said, Lewis, maybe looking back on what didn't work at RC, looking forward would be a different story. We are just getting started. Around the NFL, we're going to start with RC's former team Pittsburgh and former quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, who had this to say about the franchise.
You have to evolve. You have to evolve as a team. You can't just assume that everybody wants to come play for the Steelers anymore like they used to. People used to want to come play for Pittsburgh because you had a chance every year to win a Super Bowl.
What's he saying there, RC? What do you think he means by that?
You know, all respect to Ben Roethlisberger, great teammate, Hall of Fame, first ballot guy to me, but he's wrong because when you look at free agent signings in Pittsburgh, you think of names like James Ferrier, Jeff Hardings, Kevin Green, who's a Hall of Famer, and me. Ain't no way that I should be one of the biggest free agent signings in a team's entire history, but I am because the free agency was not where the Steelers built their team. They built their team through the draft. And so to in some way imply that people don't want to play there or that was the way the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to grow in order to build a team, that is just wrong in my opinion.
And you have such a great story from an undrafted free agent to a Super Bowl champ. Really, really inspiring. All right, let's go to Minnesota where Justin Jefferson had this to say about the Vikings quarterback situation, and I quote, "Luckily, ain't my decision. I'm sitting back and I'm waiting for all these decisions to be made. I'm really just showing up and being myself and making the plays that I make. I'm definitely looking forward to see what we're going to do with Sam, if we're going to bring him back. Of course, J.J. McCarthy is going to have his opportunity to make some plays and to see if he is going to be the starter." Close quote. I think he has a future in politics because that was like the perfect answer. Lewis, where should the Vikings go at quarterback?
Yeah, and I think this is one of these situations where, look, I'm a big J.J. McCarthy fan. I am. And I think they did a lot of work last offseason in the draft run-up when they, on a guy like J.J., and I think they saw all the things they wanted to see during the offseason and in that one preseason game where you see him just going off as far as his ability to push the ball down the field, make good reads in the intermediate part of the field, shows mobility, shows touch. I mean, look at some of the throws that this guy is making. I think, look, Sam had a fantastic year. He really did. But I think the future, they saw it in J.J. McCarthy. And I think they saw it in this tape at Michigan, and they saw it in the preseason and during off-season OTAs, mini camps, and then training camp when he was in Minnesota. I think it's time to turn the page on him, for him to be the starter. And I think ultimately that's what they're going to wind up doing. And Sam's going to wind up going on and continuing his career somewhere else. I just don't see them re-signing Sam Darnold to a big contract and having J.J. McCarthy continue to wait. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I kind of feel the other way, Lewis. And listen, you've been in these seats and in these sorts of meetings. But when I look at what Sam Darnold was able to do with this team, I believe it's hard to just move on without at least attempting to get him re-signed and have a Sam Darnold be the starter headed into the season. And as J.J. McCarthy grows and as J.J. McCarthy is more prepared coming off of that injury, you move him into the starting lineup. Now, the difficulty here will be what will be the market for Sam Darnold on the free agency market, and how will Sam Darnold be, I guess, approached, or what will he be offered? Because you don't want to combat some of those high totals in free agency when you have a J.J. McCarthy in wait. But I believe if you can afford him and if things work out and there's a compromise to be made, Lewis, you allow Sam Darnold to come back and have an opportunity to start until J.J. McCarthy is 100% ready to go.
But see, that's the thing, right? So let's just say you're you're Sam Darnold or I'm Sam Darnold, and you're sitting there and you're knowing that, look, they're going to try and sign me to a below market contract because they're just biding their time until they can put their first rounder in there. I'm not doing that. I know that my days are numbered. I'm going to try and go somewhere else and try and get really paid to where I can maybe establish myself somewhere else. You know what I mean? So it's not just up to them. It's also up to Sam because Sam has choices now. And so I think it's going to be one of those situations where, look, maybe he'll prioritize fit there in Minnesota over money. But I don't know too many players who do that.
Yeah,
you know
I mean?
what I mean?
And the fit was perfect, right? The proof is there. With the exception, though, of those last 2 games, those were really, really ugly. All right, coming up.
What concept or philosophy would you say is like the hallmark of the defensive philosophy that you have?
Yeah, pretty simple. We take the ball away. That's what we do. We stop the run, and we want to make exciting plays for our football team, and that's really what we do.
They've been pretty good at taking the ball away. I don't know about stopping the run, though. What are your expectations, Boog?
Well, I need them to be just a little bit more aggressive. Like, if you understand who Matt Eberflus is, at his core, he's going to be a 4-man front. He's going to mix in cover 2, cover 3. He talks about stopping the run. Well, how do you do that? It's really a numbers game. You're going to have to bring that safety down and get that 8-man in the box or move your defensive line. So I just want him to be a little bit more aggressive. You're going to have an uber-talented player in Micah Parsons. So how do you make him and put him in the right position? Because that's the job of a coach. Put your best players in position to make plays. And I think Matt has to become more aggressive. The system he plays is the same system I played in. It's not necessarily an aggressive system. It allows your players to make a ton of plays from a simplistic standpoint, but I think he's got to be more aggressive with the football this day and age.
The other piece of it is we've watched this team be very good at turning the ball over. Under Dan Quinn, that was a huge reason this team led the league in scoring, was because they got extra possessions, because they put the football in the end zone as a defense, because they played on short fields. But the demise of this defense was not being able to stop the run. And to me, that's the thing he said second. That should have been the thing he said first. What are you going to do at the linebacker position to be more stout? What are you going to do in the interior of the defensive line to invert the line of scrimmage, to play on the other side of the football? I don't care how good Micah Parsons is. I don't care how many plays Trayvon Diggs can make on the outside. If you can't force teams into 3rd and longs and put teams behind the sticks, you won't get opportunities to turn the ball over, as Boog is alluding to here. By dropping that safety into the line of scrimmage or into the run front, you're going to leave yourself susceptible outside, but you won't get a chance to make plays if you don't play well on 1st and 2nd down.
And that really kind of leads into what I wanted to say about, what kind of philosophical approach is he going to really take? And Booger, you're talking about, look, stopping the run is a numbers game. Well, not if you're Philadelphia. Then you can still play too high and stop the run when you have monsters up front. And I think, quite honestly, when you're talking about monsters and you're talking about monsters in the interior, that's the number one thing from a personnel department standpoint that they have to do with this football team. They have to get bigger, more aggressive, more physical. So it's not always a numbers game. It's not always about committing more resources. It's about, we can whip your front with 7, and we can keep 4 in the back end, and we can still play too high. And look, obviously, the utilization of Micah Parsons is going to be huge. What Matt does with him is going to be critical. He cannot just be a static player. He can't be a guy that you know where he is all the time. And I think we all would agree that would be foolish to do. The kid is uber talented. He's multi-positional. Then you have to use him as a chess piece. But I think philosophically, when you're talking about stopping the run, and RC, you talked about the fact that should have been the thing that he started with, that starts with personnel. And that starts with big boys. And that starts with big boys that are nasty and that are willing to play the run with fury and earn the right to rush the passer and turn the football over on 3rd down.
And, Lewis, I completely agree with you. And this is a draft that's going to be loaded with big boys up front. I think, if anything, Philadelphia taught us you can't have enough defensive tackles. You can't have enough big bodies. But are the Cowboys and Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones going to commit to that either through free agency or the draft? That's the key. It seems like with the Cowboys, we come back to the same issues. What is Jerry and Stephen going to do as far as acquiring the personnel that you and I are speaking of, Lewis?
Yeah, I think it's been many times that they've been good enough throughout the season. And so now you know you're not. You know you didn't stop the run well enough. You know you didn't run the football offensively well enough. And that's another thing that Brian Schottenheimer is going to have to change is the mentality. Lewis, you know this. Boog, you know this. Every team that you played on that was a great rushing football team, they learned how to stop a run because you saw it all off season. You saw it during training camp. There's going to have to be a philosophy push on making this team more physical up front in the run game on both sides of the football. And I think you can start that through free agency and the draft by putting an emphasis and priority on that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the key. It really is. You know, I think what Philadelphia has taught everybody this past year in particular, and Vic Fangio doesn't run a whole bunch of different stuff. They out-execute you and they play fast. But just like you guys feasted on people when you were down in Tampa, you know, under Monty. That's what you did. The game somehow always returns back to really what is known and tried and true. It's about personnel, and Dallas has to get better personnel on the defensive side, and they better start up front. They better be watching the big men run at the combine. They better be at all the lifting sessions. They better do all the interviews, and they better load up on them, because if you don't, you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
Just listen to Lewis. There you go. He's got the game plan. Hey, we were all sitting here last year back. I just can't forget that, RC, talking about that run game. We couldn't believe that they did not address that in the offseason. And that played out in such a big way during the year. Anyway, we could talk about Dallas. So that's a question. Why haven't they ever won multiple playoff games in a season with Lamar Jackson? Is it a missing piece, a lack of execution? What is it, Lewis?
Look, to me, really, it's a matter of execution with this football team. Look, there's always pieces that you feel as though you could accentuate what you already have, and maybe that'll be the one piece that'll put you over the top. Maybe if we just had a better player here, it'll put you over the top. But look, Booger and Ryan both know locking in at the most critical moments, especially over the course of 3.5 hours, 4 hours in freezing cold weather like it was up in Buffalo, you know, in this playoff game. It's a hard thing to do. It just seems like Baltimore isn't able to kind of like maintain that kind of focus, maintain the kind of identity that they've established for the previous 17, 18 weeks and carry it over into the playoffs. They somehow get off the tracks and get sideways. Yeah, of course they could use another wide receiver. Sure, they could use another corner in the back end to really help them in man coverage and maybe be a better playmaker. But look, I think this is an execution issue, and they got to find out how to get over the hump that way.
Yeah, I completely concur, Lewis, especially when it comes to the secondary. I think the secondary could be better. They need to make sure they're better on the outside. I like Marlon Humphrey when he's inside playing the nickel and not on the outside. They need another impact player up front. But the bottom line is this, is that when you get in these playoff games, you have to play your best. It's amazing how Baltimore's best players continue to come up the smallest in the biggest games. And I don't know whether that's mindset or whether these players are starting to put too much on it. Even you go back a couple years ago, they didn't run the football. They got away from their identity. So it's not just a player thing, it's a coaching thing also. How come this organization can't just say, you know what, I get it's the playoffs, but let's just go out and continue to play football the way we played all year. It's almost as if they put too much emphasis on the playoffs, and it gets into the entire organization's head, not just the players, but the coaches also.
No, absolutely. And I think Kyle Hamilton was on with Mina Kimes, and he said the exact thing. Like, we don't need nothing else. The fact that we continue to get here, the fact that you dominate in the regular season, that you are the kings of the AFC North, you've had the number one seed, you've had the number one defense, you've had the number one offense, but you keep falling short. That's a you issue. That's a you problem. That's an execution problem. That's a making the moment too big problem. And now, no matter what happens throughout the regular season, I believe us on the outside as the media, the fans, the people who watch the game, we understand it doesn't matter until the playoffs. I believe the Baltimore Ravens players have that in their head as well. And when Lamar Jackson throws an early pick or when he drops the football on a Damar Hamlin sack, I think they immediately jump into not again. And you know this, Booger. You know this, Lewis. Having played, you can't be in not again mode in the playoffs because that'll have you sitting on your couch watching the next weekend.
Boog, your early 2000s Bucks, those teams you were on, they fell short a few times before winning the Super Bowl. What's it like as a player trying to retool every year before you finally get to that championship?
It's hard, but Hannah, it's the same way if you win the Super Bowl. You got to retool either way. And we got ourselves in the mindset of understanding we were really, really good. We continue to have confidence. That's got to be the key for Baltimore. Don't lose confidence in what you're doing. To RC's point, you're good enough to get there. Can you be good enough to get over the hump next time?
Yeah.
This really is. It's a matter of them, Hannah, locking in. And I know we talk about it all the time as far as a team's ability to focus, a team's ability to be consistent. You know, the whole word consistency in football, it's one of the toughest things to get your arms around. They're going to have to figure out a way.
So this is my favorite. I don't know if any of these guys ever actually took karate, but let's get defensive. Oh, my goodness.
I was in Cobra Kai.
What
I
you
am
say,
in Cobra
RC?
Kai. So I am in Cobra Kai this season. So I do have a little bit of an understanding of the martial arts.
Wow.
That's a beautiful thing.
Fan.
All right, Field Yates, 4 defensive tackles going in the first round of his latest mock draft, led by Michigan's Mason Graham, going to the Jags at number 5. His teammate, Kenneth Grant, would be headed to Buffalo at number 30. So Booger's here just in time to be dressed in karate gear. Boog, who are your 3 top defensive tackles in the draft, my friend?
I love it, Hannah. My favorite time of the year. I'm going to start with number 3 and go from 3-2 to 1. Number 3 for me is going to be Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle from Michigan. A mountain of a man. He can play in an odd front or the even front. But the thing I love about him is his playmaking ability to be powerful and long. And nothing permeates through a team when you see a big man run. And I just want you to turn the tape on and watch this guy at 6'3", 340, run and chase. He's going to test out the wazoo at the combine. I can't wait to watch him test. Number 2 for me, Walter Nolan, formerly of Texas A&M, now of Ole Miss. He put on the show at the Senior Bowl. I love a guy that can get upfield, can be that one-gap penetrator, and that has pass rush versatility. I'm not concerned about the size. 290 pounds is big enough. Can you get upfield? Can you play that 3 technique? Can you rush the passer? I think Walter Nolan can absolutely do that. But my favorite guy of all, Mason Graham. I'm going back to Ann Arbor. Mason Graham from Michigan. And here's the thing. You talk about a guy, RC and Lewis, that reminds me of me. This is this young man. It's not about the size. I don't worry about arm length. I look at his ankles. He's got thin ankles. He's a playmaker. He's going to make plays sideline to sideline. And more importantly, when you're at that position, I want to be a guy that can accumulate some stats. And Mason Graham will do that. He might be a little lighter version of Boog, but he reminds me of Boog nevertheless.
RC.
You know, I mean, what I don't really know how to really follow that when you just say, hey, if there's a guy who reminds me of me, it's this guy.
It just reminds me of me.
Well,
so
we'll just move on. We'll move. Yeah, really. We'll move on from Mason Graham. I'll just talk about Walter Nolan, since we already know what Mason Graham is. Look, Walter Nolan is one of those guys. Well, I'll tell you what, when he came out of high school and he started off down there at Texas A&M, he was a guy who a lot of people talked about as being an underachiever and someone who, along with all the other 5 stars that they had down there at College Station, hadn't really lived up to all the hype. Well, I'll tell you what, this year at Ole Miss, he got after it. Him and Princely Uman-Miel on the defensive end, who they got to transfer from Florida, these guys were a problem. Walter is a guy who can be a problem because of his get-off. He has relentless chase. He has power at the point of attack, and everybody loves big guys. Everybody's going to want them. They're going to get drafted high, just like Walter Nolan and the guy who reminds Booger of Boog.
I can't. Okay. RC, we're going to talk about DBs. I don't know who reminds you of yourself, but listen, let's look at Field Yates' latest mock draft. There are 3 DBs going in the first round, all corners, led by Travis Hunter at number 1 by the Titans. Of course, 11 picks later, another Michigan man. We have Will Johnson going to the Cowboys. Kentucky's Maxwell Hairston will go to Green Bay at number 23. RC, give me your top 3.
Well, listen, none of these guys remind me of me, and all of them have skinny ankles. So at least Boog has that. And we're going to start with Benjamin Morrison of Notre Dame. Now, his year was cut short because of a hip surgery, but coming into this year, this guy was thought of as a top 10 pick. He's long, he's rangy, he has good hands at the line of scrimmage and extreme ball skills. As a freshman, he had 3 interceptions against Clemson. I expect him to be a day 1 starter next year in the league and a first-round draft pick. At number 2, I'm going with Will Johnson the same way that Phil Yates did. Listen, this guy is a 5-star from Detroit, Michigan. He came in, he was a big-time player walking on the campus. Early on in the season, he was a pick 6 waiting to happen. He started to take some chances because I believe he was feeling himself, but he walks into a team next year, becomes their number 1 corner with physicality, ball skills, and obviously he understands how to play the game physically by playing at Michigan. And Travis Hunter is obviously the number 1 corner. I know there's a lot of questions about him saying he wants to play both sides of the football, but he has to be a QB1. With those cornerback 1, with those sort of skills that he has, the way that he catches the football, he's going to be a guy that makes big-time plays.
That's an outstanding list, RC. I think I agree with you when it comes to Travis Hunter. It's going to be interesting with Morrison and Johnson based on when they get to Indianapolis, based on the physical, based on the medical, and also what they run. I'm really wanting to know what Will Johnson runs in the 40, because if he can run 4.4, now he's scheme versatile. But if he runs 4.5, 4.6, now you got to think of him more of as a zone corner.
Yeah. And interesting, Hunter's listed as a DB. We've